Syracuse football has lost its last two games. It's eerily reminiscent to last season's start. A handful of wins, stringing together excitement surrounding Syracuse football, and then a couple of tough weeks. This week is an identity check for the Syracuse football team as they go into their toughest matchup of the season against a Florida State Seminoles team that can contend for a national title. What you do on Saturday determines who you are as individuals and what this team is as an identity as they progress for the remainder of the season. It's your Locked On Syracuse Thursday. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Oh, what's up? What's happening? Welcome into your Locked On Syracuse Thursday episode. It's your boy OB saying thank you so much for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today and every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. There are a lot of parallels from last season's start to this season's start. Last year, Syracuse wins 6 straight, building momentum. They got up to number 14 in the country, if you can remember back to that. A little bit similar this year. Not as many big wins, not any conference wins, but Syracuse starts 4-0. The conversations start to stir surrounding the Orange. People are starting to get excited about Syracuse football this season, heading into a huge 3-game stretch. Same thing goes for Syracuse last year. You're 6-0. You're going to Death Valley to play Clemson in what could be a gigantic ACC championship game determining matchup. Syracuse plays a great first half defensively, falls apart in the second half, and it sparks a 5-game losing streak for the Orange. This time around, Syracuse heading into a 3-game stretch that would have any college football team a little bit worried, a little bit excited, and is definitely a 3-game span that defines a season in large part. Not necessarily in wins and losses, but how you play that matchup, how you play those games. And last year, as Syracuse went in that 0-5 skid, it faded and it fell. And you were wondering what this team's identity is. Who are they? Can they come out and play and win and coach for that matter, right? The coaches are not scot-free and off in their own parallel world for this discussion. Incredibly involved, incredibly pertinent, and need to be reviewed in these conversations as well. You are playing your most difficult game of the football season at 12 o'clock on the road on Saturday. Your toughest game of the year in an absolutely ruckus environment, a team that is contending for a national title, and a fan base that is excited to be back in that conversation, right? How long has it been since Florida State was contending for national titles? Famous Jameis time? Is that what we're going back to, right? It's been a while. They're excited. It's a fired up fan base. It's an excited fan base, and it is going to be an environment that is incredibly difficult to play in. The third game of your 3-game stretch. And in games 1 and game 2, Clemson and North Carolina, Syracuse didn't really rise to the occasion. And I said this after Clemson, and I'll say it again after North Carolina. Most people predicted 3 losses in this stretch. We're 2/3 of the way there with the toughest game about to happen. 3 losses is not an issue. Losing these 3 games is not an issue. But I need to see something from the Syracuse football team on Saturday that brings me back next week, that brings me back in week 7, that brings me back this is week 7. That brings me back in week 8, and brings me back in week 10 and 11 and 12, right? This is a game right here that unfortunately could be the last game a bulk of the fan base watches if things go incredibly south. That's the reality. And I don't think I'm stretching on that. If you do, let me know. Twitter, LO_Syracuse over there in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. Am I overreacting to that? If Syracuse comes out and loses this football game against Florida State by 40 points, how many people aren't turning the orange back on this year? I think it's a decent number. But if you tell me that Syracuse goes out, they can lose this game by 2 scores. They can lose this game by 15, 16, 17 points and have it not be a failure and have people want to come back and continue watching this team. But you have to show something in this game. In the 60 minutes that you play on Saturday at 12 o'clock, in your biggest, toughest game of the season, you've got to show some life. You've got to show that the offense is fun. You've got to show that this 3-3-5 defense can compete with upper-level teams. Because the question with the 3-3-5 is that it does a good job against middling teams. It does a good job against bottom-tier teams. But how does it hold up against your top-tier coaching staffs? And how does it hold up against? That's a different story. And you saw it against Clemson. Doesn't hold up as effectively. Beat over the top consistently. You saw it against North Carolina. Drake May has a career day. Had his way with the Syracuse defense. And you are now playing the best team of the trio. Florida State is the hardest game that you and almost anybody in the Atlantic Coast Conference will play this year, barring a gigantic non-conference game that isn't really coming to my mind right now. This is the toughest game that everybody in the ACC will play. And if you are fortunate enough to not have Florida State on your schedule, you're jumping for joy. You're excited that you can get a run to the ACC championship game without having to play them, because that is an advantage that the rest of the league doesn't have. In this game, Syracuse needs to show who it is. Are you a group of football players that are going to battle and going to fight and going to grind it out? Yeah, you're down your best player. You've been down your best player for 5 weeks now. How do you respond to that? Can you overcome that challenge? You lost Dennis Jacques Jr. for the rest of the season. How does the defense respond? Does the next man up mentality that we did see pretty strongly and pretty impressively last year continue to be one of the things that you see from the Syracuse football team, right? As Rocky says, it's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, how much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Can Syracuse continue to take and get up and throw some punches? That is what I'm looking for in this football game on Saturday. I'm not looking for Syracuse to go in and upset a top 5 team in the country in Florida State. If that happens, hooray, awesome. We're going to have a hell of an episode on Locked On Syracuse following up with that. But if Syracuse loses this game, which as 17.5-point underdogs is the reality that is going to most likely happen, what do you show in that loss? What kind of character do you show? What kind of fight do you show? And can you show this fan base? Can you show the Syracuse football fan base that you are still here for 5 more games? That you are still worth watching? That you are, and this is one people hate to see, more important than the Beacon Skiff apple orchard on a Saturday afternoon? Because that's what you're competing against in a Central New York fall. Is your game more entertaining than apple picking? That's what Syracuse is doing this week. Can you show me that that is worth the time? Can you show this fan base that they should stay home on their couch because Syracuse is done playing home games outside of one more stupid? Can you show this fan base that they should stay home or go somewhere to watch this football team. We'll take a quick break. We'll talk some more on the other side, and then we'll take a look at Florida State, a hell of a football team. I'll tell you that much. But first, let's chat a little bit about FanDuel Sports Book. Snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. I enjoy FanDuel. It's simple, and that is what I think is the big thing for it, is the simplicity behind it. Let me give you a Chiefs-Broncos pick tonight. The Broncos are terrible. The Chiefs are pretty good. 10.5 is a lot of points. I'm not touching that. Let's go to an anytime touchdown scorer. Let's go to someone who's a little bit of a favorite. I'm sorry if that's a chalk pick. Give me Isaiah Pacheco. Anytime touchdown -135. That's $27 to win 20. That'll be my bet of the evening. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Okay, Owen Valentine here on the Locked On Syracuse Thursday episode. We're talking Syracuse. We're talking what they can show you. We're talking what they need to do in this football game on Saturday. No one here is saying that they're writing Syracuse football off if they lose to one of the best teams in the country. No one here is going to say that if Syracuse loses a football game to a Florida State football team that is number 4 in the country, that this is a failure of a season. Syracuse can lose this game and have a successful year. We know that. That is established, and I want to make sure that I reiterate that you can lose these 3 games and have a successful year. 9-3 is a successful season for Syracuse football. Babers has been here 8 years. A 9-3 season has happened one time. One time, okay? 9-win seasons are a once-in-a-decade thing for Syracuse football as it currently stands. If you've got issues with that, that's another conversation, right? I'm not saying that is what you should be complacent with. That's what you want. But right now, a 9-win season, a 9-3 regular season happens once in a decade for the Orange. And so when that is the case, you can lose 3 games to the best of the ACC and the games you're supposed to lose. But you do have to show that you're still a decent football team. And you've got to show that you're going to come out and still be all right when you face the Virginia Techs and the Pitts and the Georgia Techs and the Boston Colleges and the whatever other team that is not coming to my brain right now that is the last game on Syracuse's schedule that I did not mention yet. You got to show something. And you have an opportunity to show things, right? This is a high-powered, high-energy, highly efficient, and highly effective Florida State football team. It is led by who was once a Heisman Trophy frontrunner or candidate going into the year, faded out a little bit, but Jordan Travis is one hell of a quarterback. Okay? They have incredible players on this football team, and Dino Babers gave them the nod, amongst other comments, right? The issue that, you said that we're losing players to the portal and not bringing in players to the portal, whatever. We talked about it a little bit. We can talk about it more if we need to. Florida State attacked the transfer portal incredibly this offseason, found vital pieces, and key immediate contributors that they have found successful. Keon Coleman is going to be someone that you've got to be worried about. Johnny Wilson in the receiving game, someone you got to be worried about. Lawrence Tafili out of the backfield is a receiving threat with 11 receptions on the season. When he's in the game, he's a guy to look out for, right? This is an offense that can mix things up. It's an offense that wants to beat you over the top. It's an offense that saw, hey, that's what Clemson just did. That's what North Carolina just did. They had a great success over the top. And what happens with that? I'll stay on the offense for a little bit. I was watching. I'm going to pull my phone out just so I can give them the credit before I move on here, I was watching the War Chant TV Florida State Jeff Cameron show this morning or this afternoon as he's talking about this matchup a little bit. And one of the keys that they pointed out in this game is Florida State was very successful against Syracuse last season. Part of the skit, Florida State came to the Dome, took care of business, and what they were able to do was that underneath pass. And the 3-3-5, we've known this season and we've noticed, right? It was happening against Army. It's happening in a lot of other games, has left underneath passes open a lot. And you can get those 5 to 10 yard passes with relative ease. The conflict they were talking about is that Florida State has really been a shot taker this year. And 20% of their passes this season, so 1 in 5 pass attempts, has been north of 20 yards. And that was sort of what they tried to do last year as well. But this game against Syracuse in the Dome, they switched that approach up. And almost, I think 10 or 15% less passes were deep shots. And they only threw the ball, and actually that stat was wrong. They only threw the ball, I believe, north of 10 yards was the stat. And if I misquoted this, I apologize. They only threw the ball north of 10 yards, 4 out of 22 or 4 out of 23 attempts. They were really taking that underneath look that Syracuse gave them. Now, here's where things get problematic for Syracuse. Is Florida State can come in and take that when you give it to them. But the big concern for me, offensive or defensively in the 3-3-5, as we look at what Rocky Long's been doing so far, is they've been getting beat over the top at too great a clip. And if you are going to allow Florida State to take that underneath pass that is going to get them 5, 6, 7 yards and still get beat over the top, this is going to be a long football game. You've got to take one of those away. Now, the percentages, the effectiveness of the long ball has not been tremendous for Florida State from what they were saying, right? They're not the greatest success rate on these deep balls, but they're throwing. And as they continue to throw them, they're going to connect, especially as open as Syracuse has left some receivers in the last 2 weeks. If you give them chances, if you give them opportunities with the deep ball, they're not going to let you get away with it, right? You need to step up in this football game. When you are playing talent that is as far ahead of you as Syracuse will see this year, you cannot afford to give them opportunities like that. How do you prevent it? Rocky Long, he is the greatest adapter, the great alternator of defense, right? He's been getting praise for his halftime adjustments. He's got to make pregame adjustments. This needs to be honed in on. You cannot allow them to succeed both underneath and over the top, or else this is going to be a 50-point football game for the Seminoles. They are going to steamroll you. It is going to be embarrassing, and the rest of the season will be written off by a large cohort of Syracuse football fans. And I am sorry to be that blunt, but I do believe in my heart right now that that is the reality. If you come out flat and you get steamrolled in this football game, I think the season will be written off by a tremendous number of Syracuse football fans. And I know there are loyal fans that will not be the case of. I know there are fans that will sit down and have a day every time Syracuse football hits the field. And I commend you for it. But to a casual fan, to the non-live, bleed, and die Syracuse football fans, these are the 3 games you care about: Clemson, North Carolina, and Florida State. And if you don't show people enough to bring them back in this 3-game stretch where all of the eyes are on you, no one's searching for that game on the ACC network. No one's searching for that game that's on ESPN Plus. No one's searching for that game that's on whatever other channel Syracuse, drops down to when they dip out of ESPN games. All right? People aren't going through that trouble. No one's going to the bar to watch you play, another bottom tier ACC football team. People don't want to. There are other things going on, and I can't fault them for that either. On the other side, we'll talk a little bit about Syracuse offensively because they need to have themselves a day as well. Because I will say this, Florida State is a tremendous football team. However, they are yet to really come out firing from start to finish in a game this year. And there have been, very vulnerable moments. You look back to that Clemson game that they probably, I could take the word probably out, that they should have lost, barring a missed field goal. You look at, was it BC who played them really close, right? This is a Florida State team that's winning football games and is very good, but they have been vulnerable many times this season. Let's take one more break, then we'll close out our Locked On Syracuse Thursday episode. Let's chat a little bit about LinkedIn jobs. Oops, give me one more second. I closed out the wrong ad after we read our FanDuel ad. Let's chat about LinkedIn jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. You just add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Don't forget that. The terms and conditions apply. Owen Valentine and Locked On Syracuse Thursday episode. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every day. As always, we're free. We're available wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. That's your team every day. We're rounding out our Thursday episode here, talking a little bit of that macro look at Florida State. We talked a little bit about what they can do offensively. They're a very, very strong football team. They're a team that wants to score points. They're a team that wants to move the ball. They're a team that has taken shots over the top. But as we saw last season, they will very much be okay with that old approach. You just take what they're giving to you. And if they're giving you 5 or 6 yards of play, that equals a lot of first downs and it equals a lot of won football games. Let's flip the script. What has been the biggest offensive kryptonite for Syracuse this year? If you're not saying the offensive line, go watch some more football. Go watch some more Syracuse football because the offensive kryptonite this year has been the O-line. You can say there are some other things contributing it, no doubt about it. Schrader's decision-making has not been flawless. Schrader's execution since the start of ACC play has taken a dip. Jason Beck, I love Jason Beck. I hate when I have to say things that are not incredibly kind to him, about him, whatever. His play calling hasn't been exactly what we wanted it to be. Not as fun, a little bit stagnant, lacking that success that we saw early on. And it's an elevation in opponent, no questions asked. You expect some regression in that. But it seems like it's taken a big hit. The receivers battling injury, right? Arondé Gadsden, we know. Isaiah Jones been out. Trevor Pena's been out, right? They're got to overcome those things. It's difficult to. There are some challenges. But the offensive line has been brutal. And I was watching that show, that War Chalk, whatever it is, that show that I was talking about earlier. War Chant, not War Chalk. I apologize to them. Good show, really fun. But they're talking. They say the thing that stands out when they look at Syracuse is that offensive line. And they mention, right? LeQuint, pretty good. That was the list. That was the list. They said that Allen Kidd's a pretty good player at the running back, and the offensive line has been weak, and the offensive line is beatable. That is the perspective right now of Syracuse football. And that's not the coach's perspective. That's not the team perspective. But from an outside perspective, right, of people looking in at Syracuse football, that's what they took. That was their takeaway. It's no longer the post Purdue, look out for Garrett Schrader. That guy will beat you on the ground. He's a dog. He's a player. That's a big boy. That's a good guy. Right? That narrative's faded. And that's not a knock on Schrader because we know who Garrett Schrader is. We know what he can do. That's not me knocking him, but the perspective of him, the worry heading into games of Garrett Schrader has deteriorated. And I think a lot of it has to do with the consistent pressure he's under, the lack of the O-line getting things going and developing that flow and that rhythm and that comfort that you need to succeed at the high level games in the ACC. And Florida State, running a 4-3, has quite the batch of players on the D-line. Ever heard of a guy named Jared Verse? You will on Saturday. You will on Saturday. He's got 2.5 sacks on the season. He is a man that can live in a backfield. He is a big boy. He is a grown man, as many people will say. 6'4", 260. A guy that you should be worried about. All right? Patrick Payton in the mix. Josh Farmer, another hell of a player. Redshirt sophomore. Just a really, really, really good team. 2 sacks on the season for Farmer on the D-line. 6'3", 311. How about that for a big boy? Josh Farmer. And he wears number 44. Yikes. Love a guy who wears number 44. I won't tell you that. I can't lie about it. Can't lie about it. Kyle Juszczyk, I'm a sucker for Kyle Juszczyk. That 44. Zaire Franklin. Come on, Madden. Give Zaire some credit. Give that man a rating. Give him an avatar that looks somewhat like him. If you don't know what I'm talking about, find Zaire Franklin on Twitter and see what he's been doing. Madden did him dirty. We're Syracuse people. I love a player wearing number 44. Josh Farmer's a hell of a player with that number on his back. I'll tell you that much. It's a very, very strong and a very, very solid defensive line for Florida State. Look out, because the Syracuse O-line is a sieve right now. Okay? It is not a brick wall. It is a sieve. It is a water slide saying, come on down. Come on down to our quarterback. That's what it's been. And this Florida State defense, you don't even have to look beyond the front four for them with regards to this matchup for Syracuse, because that is the type of pressure that I expect them to be able to get on Schrader and the presence that they should have in the backfield. And I think that is what many other people expect as well. I'm going to wrap up the episode. I apologize if this seems like a dark and dreary episode. They're playing the number 4 team in the country. I would be doing you a disservice if I came onto the podcast today and said, this is a favorable matchup for Syracuse. They're really going to bring it together. I think they're a good team that is playing where you need them to play right now. And Florida State is going to lose because Syracuse they've got all their players healthy. Lie. They've looked really good on offense and defense. Lie. And they look like they should be able to beat the best team in the ACC. Lie. Okay? I'm here to be down the middle. I am here to say this is what's happening. This is the team that you are going to place on Saturday and going to play on Saturday. And me sugarcoating it does not change that the 11 guys on the other team that are on the field the same side or time as you are better football players and a better football team than we currently have in Syracuse. I am sorry if you don't want to listen to this right now. Come back next week because Syracuse probably better than Virginia Tech. There you go. We'll have a little fun, sugar-coated episode for everybody. Talking smiles, talking happiness. But for those of you that know what we're getting here, that know that I'm trying to get you the most realistic content that I can, the most honest, straight-to-the-point approach that I can give you, even if that means that I have to bash Syracuse football. Let me remind everybody before I close this out. I want Syracuse to beat Florida State. Me thinking that's going to happen is a different story. And if I come on here and tell you that's going to happen, I'm not doing my job the right way. I want them to win. That does not mean I think they're going to. With that, I wrap up your Locked On Syracuse Thursday episode. Tomorrow, a little bit more. We'll give a prediction. I don't think they're going to win. There you go. Don't miss that spoiler. All right, gotcha. But we'll talk keys, things that Syracuse can do to put them in a more favorable position and we will take this into the weekend on Saturday. Have a great day. Be kind. Make somebody smile today. Do the right thing. Be a good human being. And I'll be right back here tomorrow.